Hello, I'm Faye Foreman, and I teach nursing. This is my philosophy of learning. The definition of learning is unique for each individual. As a professor of nursing, it's important for me to define what learning is in relation to the course of study that I teach. The Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary defines learning as knowledge of skill acquired by instruction or study, or modification of behavioral tendency by experience, such as exposure to conditioning. Simon, as cited in Ambrose, Bridges, DiPietro, Lovett, Norman, stated that learning results from what the student does and thinks, and only from what the student does and thinks. However, learning in the 21st century is more reflective of the theme of unlearning. Toffler suggests that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Some might ask what unlearning has to do with learning, but each person comes to education and learning with a set of previous life experiences or biases. Although some previous learning may work as an advantage for the person as they can build on those previous experiences, it can also be a negative, as it can bring with it the mentality of, this is the way I've always done it and it's always worked, so why do I need to change how I do this? I don't believe that one theory adequately describes the process. Therefore, my philosophy of learning is based on several seminal works. Due to my profession as a nurse, and now as a professor of nursing, I find myself drawn to the works of Bandura, Brown, Collins, and DeGuide, LaVey, Cole, the basic tenets of constructivism, and the motivational theory of Maslow. One aspects of behaviorism that is used extensively in the nursing curriculum is observational learning. Both skills and outcome behaviors are modeled by experts. Whether the expert is the skills lab instructor, the clinical instructor, or the nurse the student works with in their clinical rotations, the student gets the information that they need. Then that necessary skill is demonstrated back to the expert by the student. Operationally, the students show their knowledge, which is then either rewarded or punished by their grade. Bandura would have called the nursing experts the models that the students may begin to use to adopt the behavior, values, beliefs, and attitudes of that model. In nursing, we often refer to the socializing of the students into our profession. Cognitivism, and especially situated cognition, expands on the behaviorist thought of influencing students by saying that learning is social, and that it is through shared activities and discussions that knowledge is shared and acquired, but also that there is a necessity to have context for useful knowledge to be acquired. In nursing education, the contextual learning is often seen when the students come to post-conference during a clinical experience. They'll often say things like, I saw this today. It was just like you described in class. Out of context in the classroom, the concept was unrelatable. But within the correct context, the information was able to be translated into a form that was observable and correlated with the knowledge previously obtained in the classroom. By working side by side with the RN experts who model the behaviors and best practices in nursing, these skills, behaviors, and values are instilled within the student. Kolb's work in the experiential learning theory uses experiences and observations as a scaffold for learning, but then adds the act of reflection. In nursing, we ask students to share their experiences with their peers during post-conferences. We also ask them to write and reflect back on their clinical experiences. What went well? What could have been better? What would you do differently if you were the nurse? This gives them a chance to put themselves actively into a situation that may have been more of an observation than an active learning situation. This allows them to ponder what they would have done as a nurse. In constructivism, the student draws comparisons and connections to things that they are learning or have learned in other courses or in their life experiences. In addition, constructivism requires active learning. It requires application of the knowledge, not just the memorization of facts. Constructivism requires that the student may need to adjust their previous ideas based on the new knowledge that they've gained. This is where the ideas of learning, unlearning, and relearning takes place. The reflection that is utilized in cognitivism helps to cement these activities of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Ultimately, the student will take that new information and make it part of who they are and decides how that information can be utilized by them now and in the future. Finally, Maslow. But how does his theory fit into all of this? As a motivational theory, it explains where a student is living and functioning at this point in time. For some, it may be how they decided if they are ready to learn or even capable of accomplishing the feat of nursing education. Although there's often disagreement about whether someone needs to meet all of the needs on one level of the hierarchy in order to reach the next, and whether or not you fall down from one to the other, I personally often see students at various levels of Maslow's pyramid. Some come into nursing education because they're trying to climb above their current foundational level on the hierarchy, where others may be seeking self-actualization at the top. Maslow's hierarchy helps me to understand where my students are in relationship to their goals and their ambitions to become nurses. It also helps me to realize that there is more going on in their lives than just what I see in the classroom. There is much that can be said about pedagogy and andragogy in relation to higher education. The general definition and the general use of the word pedagogy is consistent with the definition given by Merriam-Webster Dictionary, namely the art, science, or profession of teaching. But some within psychology and education have chosen to separate adult learning and develop the concept of andragogy. This is defined as the art or science of teaching adults. Andragogy receives a lot of press, and there are many lectures addressing its tenets at most educators' conferences. It has caused many higher education practitioners to move to utilize adult learning strategies in their classrooms. This move to andragogy was created by the increasing numbers of non-traditional students entering university settings over the past few years. However, the majority of students in most university classrooms continue to be those in the age range of 18 to 24 years. For some, there is now an assumption that any student above the age of 18 or a high school graduate needs adult learning strategies for successful knowledge acquisition. But I've found that many of my students, in general, to be different from what is being reported in the literature concerning adult students. Not that they don't meet some of those criteria. Even my older students, and I currently have one that's 67, tend to ask the same questions, which are more similar to what we would expect a younger student to ask. Things like, what's going to be on the test? Even after active learning experiences, there may be comments like, well, that was fun, but we didn't have a lecture, so now we don't know what you're going to test us on. It is my observation that the theory of andragogy and its associated learning activities do not adequately describe all adults. Instead, that knowledge of the 6 major assumptions of andragogy, namely that adults are internally motivated and self-directed, adults bring life experiences and knowledge to learning experiences, adults are goal-oriented, adults are relevancy-oriented, adults are practical, and adult learners like to be respected, are things that may apply to all students no matter what their age. Whitby, in 2013, argued that many of these assumptions are true of children, but that the adults controlling their learning do not acknowledge that the children can have the same learning needs as adults. He described an incident at a conference where attendees stood up at the end of the lecture with their phones posed to take pictures of the notes that the lecturer had placed on a whiteboard. His comment was, wouldn't most children like to be able to take a picture of their teacher's classroom notes so that they would be able to take them home with them and have them as a source to study from? We claim that adult students are not actively involved in the classroom because of the andragogy assumptions. But we do the same things to children with the same results. It's important for me to realize that my classroom is a mix of ages, ethnicities, cultures, language of origin, genders, and experiences, all of which play into and affect learning for my students. Throughout my lesson plans, I need to incorporate learning activities based on sound theory that can build on previous experiences to stimulate learning and the achievement of goals. Because within the parameters of pedagogy, and yes, even andragogy, learning theories give us a glimpse into the minds of our students as they learn. My older students may have more experiences than the younger ones as a foundation to build on, but without the same foundational courses such as anatomy and physiology, chemistry, and microbiology that all the students have taken, they would not be able to build new knowledge related to nursing. And ultimately, the goal of my students' learning in higher education is to become knowledgeable registered nurses. I want to thank you for listening to my philosophy of learning. If you have any questions, you can find me at fforeman@usa.edu. This is a list of the references that I used in developing my philosophy of learning. Good day.